Hello, in this recording I'm going to explain how trainees create a new diary entry in the CA Diary. Firstly, ensure you're logged in. Once you've got to the CA Diary dashboard, select the Create a New Diary Entry option from the menu. If this is your first CA Diary entry and you're on a training contract, or if you're on the flexible route, the start date field will be blank. Do take care to make sure you're putting in the correct start date for your first entry, as it's not possible to change this after you've saved or submitted your entry. The start date for training contract students is always the commencement date of the contract. In this example, the 4th of October. The end date is usually 1 month thereafter, so I'm putting in the 29th of October. What that does is gives a maximum number of experience days of 20 available for this diary entry, and that excludes weekends. However, if you want to, you can add in leave. So let's say, for example, there was a public holiday. I'm going to add that in, and then obviously you have the option of removing that if you choose to. But what that has done is reduce the number of available working days to 19. So I'm going to select that. There is an option for overtime as well. Do ensure that you don't put in any decimal points. It has to be full rounded numbers. Diary entry, use a title that's indicative of the work that you've undertaken. In this case, I'm selecting audit fieldwork. The learning levels are as shown on the CA Diary dashboard: understand, apply and integrate. The tooltip here explains what is meant by those learning levels, and if you go to the guide to professional development requirements, that explains these levels in further detail. For this, I'm selecting understand as it's the first CA Diary entry. The next section is during this period were you engaged in any audit or assurance work, including audit training. So for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm firstly going to select no. What that does, it takes me for a non-audit entry to the competencies. So the very first selection that you have there, the first option is select the competency group. So you can select multiples of these groups, or you can select them all if you wish. For the purposes of this demonstration, I will select financial reporting and taxation. And if I click away on the screen, another part of the screen, that registers those selections. The next field is competency element, and here we see all the elements that I've just selected. So I'm going to select TX1 and I'm going to select FA1 for the demonstration. If I click away off that section on the screen, I can then see my choices registered. I'm going to click add. Now we see text boxes opening up for each of the competency elements. So for every competency element, these are mandatory, and every field on this page that has an asterisk is indeed mandatory. Now you may have prepared some work offline for your diary entries, and you have to be very careful that you don't lose your work, because you have a total of 20 minutes in each pass of the screen. So just be careful and mind the session timeout feature there. So for this one, I'm going to paste in some narrative. There are a maximum of 700 characters available to trainees to record their diary entries. In this case, I'm almost at that limit. And that should explain the rationale for selecting that competency. Now, for the purposes of the demonstration, I'm just going to paste in the same narrative. And it may be in some cases that your narrative would cover off more than one competency. So you can indicate as such in your text box for each competency. So that is what it looks like for a non-audit entry. The final field is reflections on learnings. Again, for the purposes of the demonstration, I'm going to use some pre-prepared text, which is not particularly relevant. But again, there is a 700 character limit on this field as well. So do indicate how you've developed your skills, knowledge and learning during the period that you are recording. So again, just to go back and change the selection this time to say that it is actually an audit entry. So for audit entries, there is a drop-down option under sector. So you should select the most appropriate option for the type of engagement that you've worked on. You have an option for training, which can attract competencies but not audit days. You also have an option for other sectors. So if you wanted to, you could select that if the most appropriate option is not available through the list. Turnover indicated in bands of million, either euro or sterling, just to indicate the size of the entity being audited. Your job title, you have three predetermined options. Again, if you wish, you can input another option of your choosing by selecting other. Range of audit experience is a very important field because this will then allow you, or not, as the case may be, to input any audit days, which does not count towards Chartered Accountants Ireland membership requirements, but does count towards the eligibility requirements for the audit qualification. Before making any selections from this drop-down menu, it's very important that you select the tooltip as seen here on screen and read the information. Now, if I was preparing to write up an audit that was conducted under the ROI jurisdiction, I would select the ROI hyperlink, which then presents the guidance. So it's very important that you categorize your audit experience and your audit days accurately. So by doing so and selecting that tooltip, and again, if it's NI UK audit, the guidance for NI UK will appear. So if you have the benefit of two screens, you may want to move one of these over to another screen. So once you've reviewed that information and you're very clear on the nature of the audit, do select the appropriate audit. So for the purposes of the demonstration, we have 19 days, which is towards admission to membership requirements. And I'm going to say that for the entire period, I was working on a statutory audit. So that is some key information for an audit entry, and very important that you take care around that. Auditing competency elements, another drop-down menu. You can multi-select, so you can take AU1, as many as you wish. Click away anywhere on the screen, then select add. You'll see your selections have come up. Similar to the non-audit competencies, the functionality is very much the same. And here you would put in your narrative. Again, character limited to 700 characters. If you wish, you can select an element from auditing other. So for example, if it was a credit union that you were working on, you may choose to select the audit competency from that group rather than the audit competencies. Exact same principle in terms of functionality, just demonstrating copying and pasting, but obviously you can type in your narrative as you work through. Do bear in mind your session timeout of 20 minutes maximum. If you feel you're going to run out on that, save your diary entry here and then come back to it for further work. So really that completes all of my inputs for this entry, which I've converted to an audit entry. But the functionality, as you can see, for non-audit entries is there are less inputs, but the competency features work in the same way. So for the audit entry, the sector, the turnover, the job title, the range of experience, and if appropriate, the number of audit days. Do bear in mind, no audit days can be claimed rather for work and assurance engagements or for training. All my mandatory fields have been input, that is everyone with an asterisk, and also I have the option of removing competencies if I choose to, as well as adding further ones in. The information I input earlier is contained here, and the reflections on learnings is saved. So your last decision to make here is, will I save it and exit for further work, or will I submit it to the mentor? In this instance, I'm going to save it. So save and exit. You will see an option coming up to go back or continue. So that is forcing you to check the accuracy of your audit days, and it's such an important area. I'm going to select yes because I'm satisfied with the inputs. So that's my very first diary entry now saved. The page is reloaded and will allow me to put in a subsequent diary entry, and there's an on-screen message to tell me that the entry has indeed been submitted. So that concludes this presentation on creating a new CA diary entry.